Hello, Cliff Stanwick, Stanwick Real Estate, and today I'm doing a follow-up to the listing agreement, the California Association of Realtor Residential Listing Agreement that was revised in June of 2022, and I'm actually going over seller questions. The questions that sellers should be asking before signing the listing agreement. That was the longest video I ever did for YouTube and for a Facebook Live. It was an hour and a half, and it was going over the monster of the residential listing agreement, which is 14 pages long, which talks about agency, which talks about fair housing, which talks about possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure and consent, and talks about wire fraud and electronic funds transfer advisory. That talks about the residential listing agreement and a form called the seller advisory, right? So today, the goal is since you watched the residential listing agreement, or maybe you were just overwhelmed by the listing agreement, which in a roundabout way was my point. My point is this is a contract. This is a document. This is something that you're signing up as sellers and agreeing to do. There's specific things that will happen. If you accept an offer, you will pay the listing brokerage a total commission, which more or less than not will be split between the buyer's agent's brokerage and the listing agent, but there's a lot of dynamics that can go in there. So today, it's really about how to go over this. And because it's complicated, I am, again, going to roll out the old disclaimer. And at the end, these are thoughts and views and opinions expressed are my own and don't represent Real Estate Fixed Inc., which is the brokerage that I'm employed by. And the material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. This is not legal advice or financial advice, and it's my opinion. And I think these are relevant and very important questions to discuss. And as you can see, I have taken the time here to essentially come up with quite a few questions. And this is what you need to consider and ask, in my opinion, your listing agent when you sell the house. So let's hop into the agreement and get to the residential listing agreement. And the first question in this agreement is, when does your house go on the market? That's the first question you need to ask, because when you actually sign the listing agreement, your house, according to the local MLS rules, needs to be on market in a day. But you'll say, hey, I haven't got it ready to put on the market. Then you need to consider a waiver. And then you need to understand, if you don't have a waiver, you're on the market. If you decide to list at a further date, that means that there can't be any marketing of your property out there because of possibly an MLS policy, which again, these are questions you need to ask, right? And also, in this agreement, the thing is that there's a beginning date and there is a ending date, okay? How long is your house going to be listed? That is another question. And here's my opinion. It should be listed for 90 days. And why? Because houses are selling, over half these houses are selling in less than 20 days. If you have been following along with my updates and stuff when I talk about the market, houses sell in less than 30 days. And that means between the escrow and everything else that you should be able to get this house sold and transferred to the new owners in 90 days. And that is basically gets down to the next part here, which is the listing price, right? We're going to talk about the listing price. And that will also give you another opportunity to ask this question again. Will my house sell in 30 days? If the agent tells you that it's not going to sell in 30 days, doesn't matter what the excuse is, they missed the market. Okay, so now we're getting into more detail here, and there's a section in here that I meant to go over, which is 2B, which is listing terms. Well, that can be a lot of things. It could be about incentives. It could be about commission concessions. It could be about some other miscellaneous costs or fees. Unfortunately, those listing terms really can't be filled in at this point because you got the rest of the form to do. So we skip the 3, we skip the terms, and we go to what is the total commission for the listing. And again, there's 2 parts of the commission. There's the commission paid to the listing agent. There's the commission paid to the buyer's agent. Typically, they're 50%, but because of things that you decide and things you may determine, the commission rate may not be 50%. But in my opinion, there's another section down here, which we'll get to, is that it needs to be correct. You need to really make sure in this market that these terms are well understood and well made. So first of all, this is where we get into some of the essence of if you basically list this house and sell this house, this brokerage is going to get paid no matter what the circumstances are. No matter if your mother wants to buy your house now, you are paying the commission. So again, it gets back to the terms here. So moving right along, in Section A, we have this thing on Section A2 called a safety clause. Now, what's a safety clause? That means when your house was on the market, anyone that the agent allowed the house to be showed to, including other buyer's agents, if that person, after the listing expires, come back and makes an offer to you, whether or not you've relisted the house or you've relisted it with a new agent for whatever reason, they are going to get paid that commission. So the safety clause has 2 parts to it. One of them is the amount of time, and the second is how do you manage who are the people that this agent believes that showed the house. So this is complicated. It's not simple. It probably should be for a reasonable amount of time, especially if you're going to relist the house. It should be 0, because if he did not convert that or she did not get an offer after a few days, that person has moved on. So the safety clause is a big thing. Typically, in my opinion, they shouldn't be more than 30 days, but it's complicated, right? So here you are. Most of you are the first time you're seeing this listing agreement, and this is the stuff you have to go through, right? So another thing here is in Section C, which is, in addition, seller agrees to pay broker. Pay broker what? So what am I also agreeing to pay you is a question you need to ask, okay? Are there any costs or reimbursement when the listing ends? Okay, that's another thing, right? When this listing ends, are you going to have to reimburse that agent for any marketing costs? And again, you should know, right? So you need to ask that question. Are there any costs or reimbursement when the listing ends? And basically anything you agree to pay the broker at the end of the listing. Now, the next section here is Section D, and that is the buyer's agent commission. And yes, I have an opinion on this. And again, we can pop up the disclaimer, right? This is material information presented for general information purposes only. I am not going to make the agent world happy with this comment on buyer's agent commission. Buyer's agent commission should be typical of what is being offered. If you go out to Zillow, Zillow will publish all the buyer's agent's commission. Typically in this area, it is 2.5%. if you offer less than 2.5%, you are probably not going to get every buyer, because if you don't think that buyers may or may not shop the commission, or the agents don't shop the commissions, that's probably not a reality. The other part you need to understand is, since these commissions are published, they know that typically the real estate total commission is built into the price. You've given up a half a point of your house, okay? So they're going to negotiate with you. They're going to say, well, this guy gets me. He understands that I'm cheap and I love a deal. And so I'm going to negotiate. So again, the buyer's agent commission is a really important question that you need to make sure is filled out properly. You want to make sure that you are not missing any buyers in this market, okay? So the next part that we're talking about is something you probably don't really recognize here, and that is it comes into some of this ability to sell your house. So it's down here in the seller assignment, and essentially you can assign the listing during the transaction. The seller can. Now the agent cannot, but you can. You can sit there and do a couple other things. And the other part is, you're also warranting that you have the authority to list this house, and that is something that you need to understand too. Is everyone that has ownership in this house needs to sign this listing agreement, or you have to show a document that says that you have the authority. It could be a power of attorney. Again, this isn't legal advice, but again, you're representing that you can not only sign this agreement, but you have no obligation to pay any other compensation. That gets back to the safety clause if you've renegotiated and or you're relisted. And again, I'm just trying to point out here that this is a lot of moving parts and a lot of complexity, and we haven't even got past the first page of 5, okay? So, and again, it's a reaffirmation. If it's sold to anyone during the time, seller is obligated to compensate another broker. Broker is not entitled to compensation under this agreement, or broker is not obligated to represent seller in any transaction. So if you end up excluding people from the agreement, which you can do, then basically you don't have an agent now. So if you make a deal, if you come under the understanding that you're not going to pay your agent, he is not going to represent you, and that's pointed out here too. So let's move into an area that is sometimes a big surprise, and that is items excluded and included. So the question here is, what stays and goes with the house? And that is really important. There's often a lot of confusion with, if it's attached to the wall like a TV, does it stay? Does it go? I want to take a light, a chandelier in the kitchen because it was a gift from my mother. Well, you need to replace it. And you need to make sure that when you're selling the house, that any potential buyers know that that house, that item is not going to go with the house. And it could be very much a showcase piece or a very important architectural feature. And you may want to know that you should replace that fixture, that chandelier, that built-in, if you decide you really want to take it with you, with something else, right? So these are questions that you need to ask. What is included and what is excluded in the sale? And then we get down to another thing, which is an important thing you need to know, is what is leased or not owned items and what are liened items. There could be things here that are both that you have a leased solar system, but you have a loan to pay for your solar system. So the solar system could be leased, and there could be a buyout or it gets removed. The same thing could be with alarm systems. A lot of confusion a lot of times on propane and water softeners. Again, these are all things that, and if you've had some home improvement stuff, you may have some liens, attached to the house, like the heating and air conditioning, or the windows or doors, or the water heater, right? So again, you also need to provide copies of the lease agreements or any other documents showing these liens, right? So again, these are just getting into what your price and terms and what are you agreeing and what you're agreeing to pay and what is staying and what is going. And now we're talking about the MLS. And the whole reason, in my opinion, of that you are using a listing agent and not selling it yourself is because of the MLS. And this seems relatively straightforward. You think that once it's on market, it's going to be on Zillow. Well, it's complicated, right? So the MLS is a real important thing to go over, and I have a whole bunch of questions on what you need to ask your agent in regards to the MLS. So let's hop back in it. And one of the things that are really important is a couple things, and that starts right down here, which is number C. What is a broker's MLS? Now you say, well, that shouldn't matter. I'm going to see the house on Zillow. But you really want a broker and that listing agent to be a participant or a subscriber to the local MLS. In this area, that is known as MetroList. And the reason why is in the question here. That MLS is, or if checked, is not the primary MLS for the geographic area of the property. So again, when that happens, that means all the local agents, like say, for example, you list with a Bay Area agent, it's your best friend, you think they're awesome, they helped you move up to South Placer County and you want them to sell your house, they're not member of the local MLS. Well, you would need to make sure that there is either local sharing of the MLS data. Now, I will share with you, and again, this will not make people happy, but I essentially have every listing in Palo Alto, California, and most Bay Area agents have every listing in basically Placer County. So yes, you could use an out-of-area agent if you wanted to. It may make some other complexities, but if you wanted to use an out-of-area agent, yes, you can, all right? Because again, the part of this listing agreement of paying them will be subject to this agreement. Now, I will share with you that I have been in situations where if you were not a participant or a subscriber to the local MLS and you bought something off that local or you represented somebody to purchase that house, that it was questionable whether or not you would get paid a commission agreement. Now, too much information, there is a way to work around that, and that is you submit with the contract your commission demand or your commission agreement to be paid for representing this person, right? So again, this is part of the complexity that you want to make sure. The question here really comes down to in the MLS, will my house be on the local MLS for the area? Okay. And the other thing is, what information will be on the MLS? Okay. And a lot of people don't understand that people are going to be able to see all their loans, all their, what they paid for the house, when they bought it, who the bank is on the house. It won't be public, but it will be on the agent side of it. But on the public side, there's a lot of information and terms on the MLS that the agents will have access to. And your consent, you're also consenting, consents to broker providing a copy of this listing agreement to the MLS. So basically, everything that you agree with the agent is and the listing broker is now part of the MLS, right? So these are just some of the things about the MLS, and essentially you know, again, in section 6 here, you should really understand the benefits of using the MLS. If you opt out of the MLS, you're counting on that person basically to sell that house without any agents stumbling into it or anybody finding it online. And it may be totally fine for you to opt out of the MLS because you have a deal that you're putting together because the agent came to you and said, hey, another agent called me up and I wanted to buy the house. Yes, you may want to opt out of it. But again, that's a conversation that you should have, because maybe you don't want your sale on the MLS because you agreed to sell the house to another agent and your agent, and you didn't need the MLS, right? So these are questions, right? So another piece of this thing is the public marketing of the property. And so there's this thing called clear cooperation. And I know that Metroless MLS is not required to be part of clear cooperation, but I will also share with you that they don't have a coming soon status. So you need to ask those questions. Is there a coming soon status? All right. And will it impact the days on the market? Okay. Now, there isn't a coming soon status on MLS, so you can basically enter into the listing agreement to sell your house today and not sell it for a month. And when it goes out on market, it'll come out as a new listing. Now, if you had a coming soon status and you wanted to hold it off the market for 2 weeks, then when the house came on market, it would be 14 days on market. And again, I feel personally in the digital world that real estate became after COVID, you really don't want 14 days of on-market time on that listing when it's actually the first day it's on the market, right? So again, we're back into the residential listing agreement, and we're moving down to the public marketing, which we're talking about. And the questions that I would have is, what is clear cooperation? You should understand that. Can you market the home before it's on market? Which is another question that I have. When does the house go on market? And again, that's a fine line. On market or online, right? It's on market as soon as you sell the, as soon as you sign the agreement, but it's not on market until you, if you have a waiver, until it's ready, right? But you want people to, or you want agents possibly to talk it up and to reach out to people. And if you do have a good local agent, they may be pretty networked. If they're in a huge office, why wouldn't you want them to say, hey, I've got this great listing coming up, right? So these are all things you need to understand. And I think we talked about a little bit of this, which is, again, the MLS data, which is section 8. We're rolling it up here. MLS rules. These are very important to understand. Is where will my home be online? Will my home be on Zillow? On the Metroless MLS, we have to opt in to not only online marketing, but we also have to opt into Zillow. So you may not be happy that that Zillow doesn't have your house online, and your agent may have forgotten to opt into marketing, or maybe they don't opt into marketing to Zillow, right? And maybe you don't want your house on Zillow because you hate Desestimate. I mean, that's your option as well. So again, these are questions that you need to understand. Like, if you don't like the values of Zestimates, will any third-party home values be blocked? And the answer is, most of the time when you find something about your house that you like or you don't like, it's too late and it really can't be changed. Okay, so let's get to the next part, and this is a reoccurring theme in selling your house. Do you have the authority? Okay, and what are you representing here? And this is, again, one of the points that I keep bringing up about the way real estate works. it's mostly a referral business. You're getting a referral to an agent, and you don't know the process. You don't know what your responsibilities are. You don't know what you're agreeing to. And you have this great meeting with this referred agent, and you're liking everything they say and everything they do. And they do the presumptive close because that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to ask you to sign the agreement. You're feeling really good, and then you're ready to sign this agreement, and now you're not even reading this thing. I spent an hour and a half on one video, and here I am already pretty deep into this thing, and I'm still on page 3, right? So this is really the whole point that I am doing this thing. These are questions you need to ask. You need to ask your listing agent so you understand what you're agreeing to and what your responsibilities are and what your costs are. And they're more than just commissions. Okay, so let's continue. So back into here, we go over the number 9, the seller representations, and basically, do you have any notice of defaults, delinquent liens, any neighbor disputes, any lawsuits, right? These are all things that will affect the sale of your property. And the last thing that you want is to be surprised when your agent sits there and tells you, oh, the public title information showed a notice of default on your property, and I didn't know that, and we're having problems getting an offer, right? So that is part of what the number 9 seller representations are. And again, in my listing agreement thing, it goes over, or my video goes over all the threatened actions or pending or threatened actions that may affect the property or seller's ability to transfer it, any current pending or proposed special assessments. Like, people forget, oh, I forgot that the HOA, we're going to have a $40,000 assessment for new sewer line. Well, those things have ended up really poorly after the sale, or ends up being problematic when you're in the middle of the escrow, and then the seller is faced with a cancellation because the buyer didn't know about the $40,000, and not only that, maybe they want a credit at the close for that, right? And how do you negotiate that? So, or represent that? So these are some of the issues, again, just talking about section number 9, seller representation. It's really important to know what's going on with your property and to share that with your listing agent, right? So the other part of it is we get into brokers and sellers' duties, right? So this is where, again, a lot of people don't understand some of what that means, right? And so the first question is, what authorizations do you need to give to the listing agent to sell your house? Essentially, there's a lot of inspections, termite inspections, pest inspections, home inspections. These can all happen prior to the house going on sale. And there may be stuff that you've talked about from the listing presentation, and there needs to be reports and disclosures ordered, including those in 10E as necessary. There may be some advertising and marketing of the property, and you're authorizing them. You may decide that you want to see all the advertising before it goes out. Well, if it's not in the agreement, the agent doesn't have to do it. And again, these are things you need to talk about. So essentially is, what advertising will you be planning for the sale? Are they going to spend money on social media? Where are they going to spend the money on social media? You may not want your house on certain websites, right? You may not be a big Snapchat fan. I don't know. But at the end, right, this whole thing you need to understand. And you also need to, understand that these costs, especially if it's work on your house, that the agent isn't liable for these costs, but you are. Now, there could be a reimbursement, and again, that could be in the additional terms, but in essence, you are responsible for these costs, all right? And basically, that unless seller gives broker written instructions to the contrary, broker is authorized but not required to order reports and disclosures, including those specified in 10E, advertise and market the property by any method and in any medium selected by the broker, including the MLS and internet, and to the extent permitted by the media, control the dissemination of the information submitted to any medium, disclose to any real estate licensee making an inquiry, and a receipt of any offers on the property and offering price of such property. So there, right? So if you don't want the price of your home disclosed, you better understand that there's a form for you to not allow to do that. And this gets into presentations of offers, right? And the answer is, will you present all offers? And do you have an obligation to present all offers, right? And these are questions you need to ask. And the broker and seller duties are, in my opinion, really not understood, discussed, negotiated, agreed to. And it causes a lot of problems selling your house if you don't know what your broker's going to do and how you're going to do it. Like the presentation of offers, like these offer letters that came through. And these offer letters are problematic and they have to do with housing laws. Okay. So again, and you're also making an agreement to consider all offers, to consider offers presented by the broker and act in good faith or accomplish the sale of the property, among other things, making the property available for showings at reasonable times, and subject to paragraph 3F, referring to the broker inquiries of any interested in the property sellers responsible determining at what price to list and sell the property. So again, this circles back to all the stuff that goes into the duties. And this section 10 is really glossed over, in my opinion, by real estate professionals, and sellers really need to understand how it works. And personally, I discourage buyer letters, especially in a hot market, unless it has some justification of why they're offering what they're offering. I don't really appreciate the dogs and the pet frogs and all. They've been looking for years for a perfect place for their pet frog. Don't think they're helpful, okay? And then the other part that we're talking about, and I think this is the part that is very problematic, but has the most benefit for real estate, is these investigation and reports. And this gets back to the questions that you need to ask, which are basically which reports and why do I need them? Who is paying for these reports? And ultimately, the seller is responsible. What happens, if a buyer, litigates or sues me during the sale, and that's really complicated. What happens if I'm in an HOA? Are you in an HOA or common interest development? You need to ask yourself that question. And who pays the costs of the transfer fees? That is usually a big surprise, right? So these investigation and reports, getting back to this, I'm going to go back to the agreement. These investigation reports where the seller agrees within 5 days to order which means you're basically paying for them, and when required by the service provider, pay for a natural hazard disclosure report and the following report. So you're agreeing to paying for all these: the structural pest control, the general property inspection, the homeowners association documents, the preliminary titles usually included, the roof inspections of payment, the pool inspection really need to do, the septic and sewer inspection. A lot of people don't do the sewer inspection, and trust me, nothing is more unpleasant than the sewer line backing up because all of a sudden you were two people living in the house and you were downsizing, and a family of 12 is now living in your house. And that's probably a little bit of a joke, but you know what I'm saying. Is the sewer line clean? And should you do that? I personally believe that when you're selling a house, you want to take away any inspection issues before the offer is made. And I think that people don't embrace the fact that you want to sell your property and buyers want to buy your property, and they're not expecting perfection, but they're not expecting gross negligence. And some of these home inspection reports can be one of the most difficult conversations and sleepless nights for sellers when they find out that A, they didn't know they had the problem, or B, they've got a lot of problems. And it's sort of like what's behind the paint, right? So I think you don't buy a car without knowing if it's been in an accident, or if there's any repairs, or how many miles are on it, or if there was any warranty work or repair maintenance, and was the maintenance done, where the oil change is done every 5,000 miles. But somehow that whole trust is out the window when it comes to selling your house. So these inspections and reports, and who's responsible for them, and whether you need them or not. If your agent, in my opinion, this is the handy disclaimer that no one is happy about. I'm just going to tell you this again. If your agent hasn't really asked you to do any of these inspections, why? Why aren't we getting any inspections for my house? Well, it might be that he thinks the house has too many problems, or she thinks the house has too many problems, and if we do it, it's not going to help us sell the house. It might hinder to sell the house. That's why you're hiring this professional. It might be fine, but the other side of it is when you get into contract, you're going to have some sleepless nights. Okay, I'm just going to share that with you. So again, these inspections, who pays for them, and then on top of this, you are going to indemnify, defend, and hold broker harmless from all claims, disputes, litigation, judgments, attorney fees, and costs arising from any incorrect or incomplete information supplied by the seller, from any material facts that the seller knows but fails to disclose, including dangerous or hidden conditions of the property. Okay, that's a lot. That's all bad. It's bad. Get the inspections. Even if you forgot, it's disclosed, because these material facts or issues, more often than not, are going to be found out by all these pre-sale inspections. And I think, again, you need to understand, if you've owned that house for 10 or 20 years, you've got 10 or 20 years of issues that you need to remember and also disclose. That water filter in the refrigerator that popped off in 2005 that flooded the kitchen, but it didn't really cause any damage, well, that needs to be disclosed. And again, I went over material facts and some of the issues, and disclose is a beaten record, but again, that's really important. So we get down to section 11, and I am again, this is going longer than I wanted. The deposit often comes up. Who gets the deposit when someone buys your house? The answer is no one, all right? The deposit ends up in escrow or in a trust fund account, and nothing happens to it until we get to the point that either the deal is canceled or the house is getting sold, and then at that point it will be in escrow, and then it'll be either part of the purchase price and part of the proceeds after the house is sold. And the other part about it is, you may want to ask, well, how large is a deposit typically on a purchase price? You are, because of liquidated damages in California, it's only going to be 3% of the purchase cost. So if you have $1 million house, that means the maximum deposit is going to be $30,000. No, it's not going to be $100,000. No, it's not going to be their down payment. So again, deposits are a great question to ask. What sort of deposit should you expect? Should you expect 1%? Should you expect 2%? Should you expect 10,000, 5,000? It's a great question to ask when you're selling your house, and it shows up right here. Now, I don't think I spent a lot of times on the agency disclosure relationships, because when I did the California residential listing agreement. But this, again, it opens a lot of questions, right? And the first question is why are you signing an agency relationship? Because in order to have an agent represent you, you need to sign the agreement. And that's, again, what a real estate agent is. We represent you. We don't negotiate, right? That's, again, something I went over quite a bit in the residential listing agreement documents, is you're signing an agency agreement. It means we're representing you. It means that we present the offers to you. We hopefully give you a net sheet. We explain the terms to you. And if it's problematic, you talk to your attorney or your financial planner or advisor or tax attorney or tax accountant, and then we represent you, right? We're not negotiating. We're representing you. You're negotiating. We're representing you. So this gets into that. Now, seller representation, right? That is basically that we are representing you except for what is specified in paragraph 3F. Okay, what's paragraph 3F? Well, you get to go way back and you get to go seller represents that seller is not previously entered into a listing agreement and that the agent is not excluded from selling the house and getting paid. And so that you're saying that, hey, they're representing you, right? So we get back down to 12, right? So again, there's a lot of back and forth on these agreements. And again, I didn't show that to you, but that's what that section was about. And so here we are talking about seller representation that we are you have agreed that he is going to represent the seller. So you can't change your mind. You know that once we start deciding that I'm selling your house and then you want your cousin to come in, that's not the agreement you signed. All right. So anyway, and here's a part that's very complicated, and it has to do with dual agency. And part of the questions I have here is getting into here is, can I sell my home without an agent or listing agent? And the answer is only if you've excluded people or potential buyers from this agreement. Okay. What is dual agency? Again, is a tremendously misunderstood thing, and you need to ask it. You are listing your house with a brokerage, and the agent works for the brokerage, unless you hire me, because I am the brokerage. So if that brokerage has multiple agents working for them, and one of them comes and writes an offer on your house, you are now in dual agency because the same brokerage is representing the buyer and the seller. Okay, that's dual agency. Now there's the dual agency where your listing agent actually represents the buyer and the seller. That may be something you're comfortable with. You need to make sure that your listing agent is, right? Because at the end of the day, if he's agreeable to representing both the buyer and the seller, you're paying them the whole commission. If you sign an agreement for 5%, they're getting 5% of the price. You may have wished that you had negotiated a lower commission because you hired them because they know all these buyers, right? Again, it starts getting complicated. And again, I'm not giving legal or financial advice, but I am just sharing with you the challenges of dual agency. So you need to understand how dual agency works in your situation. You may end up going and buying another house with the same agency with that when the house you sold. You may buy a house from me, and then I have another listing, and you buy that house, and that is dual agency with the brokerage again. Well, if I sell my house with this brokerage and I buy another house with this brokerage, do I get any do I get a lower commission, right? You need to explain how, you need to understand how it works, how dual agency works, and when dual agency is tripped, right? And again, it's a lot of money. When you start talking about 5% on $1 million, it's $50,000. On a $2 million house, it's $100,000. On a $4 million house, it's $100,000 to each agent, or the brokerage, I should say, and then it's subject to splits and everything else. And again, understanding how commissions work, that's another question too. The broker doesn't get all the commission, and the agent may get less commission than you think they do. And that is usually a part of their business that they're not going to talk to you about. They're not going to tell you that, oh, I work for this big power team and they get half the commission. Well, you did all the work. Well, that's not what that's the business I signed up to. But it isn't like when you sit there and you want to negotiate their commission, you may not know they've already given away half their commission. And when you ask for 20% more, they're basically working for free. And so it's a part of the business where commissions are really ugly to talk about, but there's a lot of things that could trigger in your mind a commission, a negotiation of a lower commission, right? And you may want him to, or her to, refer an agent in a different area. That's usually done with a referral fee. And so that agent is getting 30% of the commission that agent is getting paid on their side of the deal. And so now we go into the commission nightmare of too many moving parts and too many things. At the end of the day, commissions are complicated. You need to hire an agent that's confident enough to talk about how they're paid and to explain to you that these commissions are part of any transaction, and that they are going to work hard for you and do the best job possible. And you shouldn't feel that you're overpaying them. It's not the commission. Are they delivering the value? So I've spent a little too much time on this, but again, this all comes back into this dual agency and how things work and everything else. And then the other part of it here is gets down to here is do I have to agree to dual agency? Yes, you do. If you don't agree to dual agency and consent to it, it can't exist. So that agent who works for the same brokerage and another buyer's agent comes in working for the same broker and they want to buy your house, guess what? You didn't agree to it, so that offer is a problem that needs to be discussed before it's presented, and you need to agree to pay that agent for the brokerage for that side of the deal, even though you said you didn't want dual agency. Okay, again, these are just some of the complications. What happens if your house doesn't sell? Again, here we are. We probably should have discussed it on page 1, but termination of agency relationship. Seller acknowledges and agrees that the representation duties of the agency relationship with broker terminates with the expiration of this agreement, or if it occurs first, the completion of any transaction specified in this agreement. Okay, termination agreements. That's why I'm asking the question, when does this agreement terminate? If your relationship is horrible, you're stuck unless you have some clause that says, hey, I'm not happy, and if I'm not pleased or think that you're not doing the work for me, I want to be released from the agreement. How can I do that? That's why the question is in there, is what happens if my house doesn't sell, and can I cancel the listing before it sells? Okay, so these are partly here in the section F, the termination of the agency relationship. And here's something that is really not understood, and that is the security insurance showing audio and video. Okay, and that is, who's responsible for any loss or damages when my house is shown? The answer is It's not the agents. It's not the people who open the lockbox. You end up essentially absorbing any damages or losses that happen while your house is on the market. I know that sounds horrible, but it says right here, broker is not responsible for loss or damage to personal and or real property or persons, whether attributable to the use of a Keysafe lockbox or showing of a property or otherwise. That also means anyone who, besides the agents, get access to the property. And then you as a seller agree to take responsible precautions to safeguard and protect valuables that might be accessible during the showing of a property, to obtain insurance to protect against those risks. So if you have stuff of value in your house, if it's art, if it's glassware, if it's stuff that you never wanted touched in the curio cabinet, and it happens to not be locked or taped shut and something breaks, you've been told to get insurance, okay? And this brings up the next section here, which is section 14, photographs and internet advertising, okay? So again, this is the next section, and we finished up with the security. Oh, I forgot to go over. So who besides the agent will have access to my house? Well, anyone that can get into the key box will have access to your house. And will you be there? Again, this is stuff you need to decide. I think understanding the price point and understanding that agents are very interesting personalities. In my opinion, I think that depending on the price point and the showing activity, sellers should, it was a really busy market, the agent shouldn't really be there. We should just set up all the appointments, and in essence, you can ask the agent to make sure at the beginning of the day that the property is okay, and at the end of the day, they can make sure it's locked up. Okay, but what happens between showing hours and stuff, I think it's probably an unrealistic expectation unless you have it written in that agent needs to be presented at all and every showings. The reason I say that is because of the fact that we have a great tool on the MLS called Showing Time. It takes out all the nonsense of back and forth of agents scheduling showings. It's basically a calendar of your house. It allows the seller ample time to have the house ready by blocking out times, and it allows the seller and buyer to basically work out the showings with the agent acting as somebody who will follow up and make sure that the buyer is qualified, and makes the showings go a lot more seamlessly. And I think it's a tool that you really don't want agents to have to make 3 or 4 phone calls to get a showing scheduled. But you also want to make sure that you have qualified buyers. Well, the agent can follow up with a text message, and the important thing is showing. So again, understand how those work. The other thing is what about cameras and video cameras in the house and nanny cams? You have to disclose that, right? People that don't know your house is, on video or you're being recorded, that's a problem. If they don't like your pink rugs, or maybe they love your pink rugs to the extent that they're giddy about them, that's going to impact the negotiation, either good or bad, and that's not right, right? So at the end, you also have to, if you have security systems on the property, you have to make that known. Now, the other side of that is it won't be on the public side of the MLS, but people will know there's security, right? And I think when the house is vacant, if you don't have security, I think you need to consider some sort of ring cam or something like that. So again, that's something that gets back to the showings and the security of the house and the access of the house, and it's kind of important. So again, back to where we are. We're here at talking about the key box and the lockbox, and we're talking about who has access, and we are talking about the sign. Do you want a sign? I think it's good to have a sign, and I think again, you want to have some agreement when the house is vacant to knowing if the agent is willing to go by and check on the property, or when will they check on the property, okay, and secure it. Another thing is we're talking about the equal housing opportunity, and that circles back. What is the equal housing opportunity? I think sellers really need to understand that you cannot discriminate when you sell your house. And what does that mean? And some of these offer letters from families that are basically sharing race, gender, can have a discriminatory impact on other people's letters. Even might be, it's just problematic. I mean, I really don't know what to say other than you really shouldn't have those letters presented with the offer, and we can also let them know that we won't be looking at those at those letters. At the end of the day, what you care about is the price, terms, contingencies, and how to deal with that, right? Here's the other part here, number 18. We start talking about what can happen. Attorney's fees. If any action, who pays for attorney's fees? If something bad happens during the sale, what happens? If any action, proceeding, or arbitration between seller and broker arising out of this agreement, seller and broker are each responsible for paying their own attorney's fees and costs, except as otherwise specified in paragraph 22. Okay? Now, we get back to something that we talked about earlier, which is the additional terms. And this gets back to essentially, is your property a short sale? How do short sales work? Okay. What is a trust advisory? If I need replacement property, how does that work with selling? And that's complicated, especially now in this new market. Will a replacement property or rent back impact the sales price? The answer is depends. It's complicated. In this uber, rocket hot seller's market that was about a year ago, no. Matter of fact, it probably helped get you more money, and it made buyers pay you more money. Now, those are very problematic, and you need to understand that, especially if you heard from your friend who sold their house last summer and they got to stay in their house for 6 months. You need to understand how those types of scenarios and situations can be problematic, and that you need to understand what's a reasonable rent back, and is there a cost associated with a rent back, and all that sort of stuff, right? So how long can the questions I had was, will a replacement property or rent back impact the sales price? How long can I rent back the property? And then another thing, which is a huge surprise to most people, is Section 20, which is the management approval. Whether you realize it or not, your listing agent does not have final approval over all the terms that you discussed. So your agent might say, you know what, I'm willing to do this and that, and I'm willing to do this with my commission or that, or I'm willing to give you a credit, or I'm willing to do this. And at the end of the day, the broker will say no. And it could be for a host of reasons. It could be a business and professional code problem with the Department of Real Estate. It could be an ethics problem with the code of conduct that all realtors are supposed to apply. But at the end of the day, if an associate licensee in a broker's office, salesperson or broker associate enters into this agreement on broker's behalf, and broker and manager does not approve of its term, the broker or manager has the right to cancel this agreement within 5 days after its execution. So the question to ask is, when will this listing agreement be approved? Okay, and again, this gets back into assignees with 21, successors and assigns. The agreement shall be binding upon seller and sellers, successors, and assigns. So if somehow you've been given the authority to sell the house through a representative capacity agreement, and some of the family members are no longer happy with you and they want to take over the listing, they can't change the terms of this. All right. And now we get into, again, that was section 20, 21, and 22. Now we get into the hot, the hot topic of dispute resolution. And again, I just want to say that this is, again, not legal information, financial information, but this is something that you need to be aware of in regards to you have dispute resolution, mediation, arbitration, and you're agreeing to mediate. Okay? If you don't agree to arbitration, you have to mediate. You don't get to arbitrate. And what is the big difference? The big difference is mediation is not binding. You still have a court option. You say, hey, I don't want to mediate. We're going to arbitrate. Well, arbitration is final. Arbitration is totally final. You may say, I don't want mediation or arbitration. I want to go straight to court. Well, there is a way to do that too, right? At the end of the day, I would tell you that everybody has an opinion of the legal system. I don't think it moves fast enough when you're trying to sell your house and you're trying to live your life, and the time component is a huge challenge here to resolve. Mediation, you can probably continue to sell your house, or if you get to the point where you're considering mediation, I think you should be able to go to the broker and resolve your problems without saying we're going to arbitration and we're lawyering up. Again, these are my opinions, but you need to understand what happens when things go wrong in this agreement, and I'm really mad at you. How do I resolve a bad situation after I sign the listing agreement? Okay. And again, we circle back to this thing, which again is hugely problematic, because if you've gone through the typical thing and you're signing this agreement with all the great hope and intentions that this is going to be a wonderful deal, and then you sign this agreement because you got the price you wanted and the terms you thought were going to work for you, but 2 days later you said, whoa, I don't know I signed that. Well, 23, the entire agreement, all prior discussions, negotiations, and agreements between the parties concerning the subject matter of the agreement are superseded by this agreement. Meaning once you sign it, that's it, all right? So the question is, how do we, if you're signing a list agreement, you may say, hey, I don't want to sign the listing agreement today, but I will sign it tomorrow at 1 p.m. If I don't have any questions. And I think you have to sit there and really, to be frank with everybody, and the whole point of this, no one should be signing a listing agreement after the listing presentation, right? That's a long story short here, right? Because again, as soon as you sit there and do this one more time, right? This is the third time in the agreement. We're back to the entire agreement, which is what happens if I sign this agreement and there are items we agreed to but are not incorporated. Well, too bad. Technically, too bad, right? And then again, you are on 24. Do you have the authority to sign this listing? You need to really know that you have the authority. If there's a trust, it's complicated. If it's probate, it's complicated. If you're in a short sale, or it's complicated. If you have a notice of default, it's complicated. you could be in a situation where in your negotiations, the house all of a sudden becomes a short sale. It's complicated, right? But do you have the authority? And then, are you a legally authorized signer, right? You're saying that you can, okay? It says, whoever the initials on this legally authorized signer identified in the signature block below appears in this agreement and any related documents, it shall be deemed to be the representative capacity for the entity described and not in an individual capacity unless otherwise indicated. So again, it gets down to, what is this entity? You know, are you and there's agreements to it, and you possibly want to see those representative capacity signature disclosure form, right? Which is not part of the residential listing agreement that I went through, right? And then again, it has entity sellers. Well, you thought you were just a normal seller. You're not. You are an entity. What is an entity? It could be a trust, a corporation, an LLC, a probate estate, a partnership, or someone that holds the power of attorney. And that this agreement is being signed by a legally authorized signer in a representative capacity and not for him or herself as an individual. And again, if you're in a trust, you're not necessarily an individual, so you need to sign it as a trustee, right? So again, that's what you're signing. And this circles back to what, again, has been a very long video. It's been a little over an hour. And these are just all the questions you need to ask. And again, this isn't legal information. This is for general information. And if you get anything from this video, you should not be signing the listing agreement after the listing presentation. You're probably not ready. You're probably not ready. And it's really the theme of both the videos that I've done. You're probably not ready because you need to think about and totally comprehend and understand what you are signing, what your duties are, what your costs are, and they're more than commissions, what you're agreeing to do in regards to showing your house and how your house is marketed and who it's marketed to. These are all complex things that you need to think about. So with that, that's the end of this video. It's the end of the questions you need to ask before you sign the listing agreement. I'm going to be working on a couple other things like the purchase agreement and the buyer broker agreement. And I really appreciate if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel or like my Facebook page or just contact me on my website at stanwickre.com. I hope you find this helpful. It helps me become a better agent because it makes me think and review what I am doing, what my service is, and I hope it helps you understand what you're doing when you sign the listing agreement to sell your house. Thank you, and all the best in selling your home.